Um, Anybody ever done a dot to dot? You know what a dot to dot is? The dot to dots, a lot of us did them when we were kids, right? They're kind of fun because you start out and you're not really sure what you're looking at, and then at the end you have this wonderful picture. There's some dots up here, but dot to dots are a little tricky if you're missing something. That's right, Greg. You need numbers on dot to dots, right? So really, the person that's building the dot to dots is really the master of the whole thing because they have to put the numbers on for us. Once the number's on there and we start following the numbers, then the picture becomes very clear, right? But sometimes, as we'll find out, sometimes the numbers aren't always there. And so sometimes we have to go on faith and start trying to connect some of those numbers, some of the dots, excuse me, and then a picture emerges. See if I can get the clicker to work. I'd like to talk today about living a life of permanent purpose. Permanent purpose. Question. I ask myself this question frequently. Do I ever find myself judging the value of my choices and actions? Every day we have many, many choices that we get to make, right? Many things we could choose to do, opportunities we have. And sometimes, for me anyway, it's easy to say, oh, well, it'd be more important if I did that. Or I could do that. That's not really that important. I think I'll pass on that for today. So I put up some different actions that somebody could take, some different things we could get involved in. Hopefully you can see it a little bit. I'll read them off to you. And got a little quiz for you here. Just think in your head. Don't need to write anything down. But what I want you to do is rank the level of importance. So we have 30 minutes visiting a sick friend in the hospital. We have 30 seconds in a conversation with a store clerk that you might stop by. 10 minutes talking to someone after church, and depending on who it is you're talking to, we know that could be 15, 20, or 30, right? Well, let's go with 10 minutes talking after church. What about spending a whole day on a volunteer service project? Some of us were able to participate in that recently. About helping a complete stranger who you may see suffering. So at least, if you can't get all 5 in the order, let's get number 1. What do you think in your mind, no reason to say it out loud, but what do you think in your mind is the most important? Got it? So how would you respond if I said that none of them are most important, and they're really all as equally important? And we got some head shaking. We got some wise people in this audience. You already had that figured out, right? Wasn't much of a quiz. When we understand and truly know that everything we do matters, all of the choices we have, all of the actions we take are as equally meaningful, then we can live a life of permanent purpose. So that's what we hope to talk to about today. We have something here that we don't want it to be too confusing, but I'm going to go ahead, and Greg may know what this is. I don't know. Greg, if you know, he's a really smart guy, so don't shout it out. But for maybe somebody else in the audience, if you've heard of this, just raise your hand. The law of sensitive dependence upon initial conditions. Anybody ever heard of this before? The laws. It actually developed after a scientist years ago, a gentleman proposed a theory that people thought was actually silly. When this scientist proposed this theory, they actually laughed him out of the auditorium, and then years later came back and created a law saying that it actually does exist. The law of dependence upon initial conditions actually has something to do with butterflies. Any ideas yet what it might be called? This is actually a law that we might have heard of, called the butterfly effect. So what the butterfly effect proposes is the concept that very small causes can end up having large effects. So when this first gentleman actually proposed this law, what he proposed was that a butterfly flapping its wings, the air that's generated would move molecules, which would then start other molecules in motion and continue expanding and developing to the point that on the other side of the world, a storm would develop. Possibly a hurricane or a tornado would develop from a butterfly flapping its wings. And again, when he proposed this, he was laughed out of the auditorium. And then years later, there seemed to be some information developed that supported this. And so thus this law actually is now in existence. Very interesting. So what we hope to talk today about is a spiritual butterfly effect, because it does exist. Tell you a little story. Got to go back just a few years. But in April of 2004, ABC honored a 91-year-old man as the person of the week. Some of you have seen these shows on TV where the person for the week is, and they have this award they want to give them or recognize them for. And usually, what happens is there's this buildup with all these facts. Paul Harvey used to be great at this, right? Remember Paul Harvey? He used to be great at this, the rest of the story. And he would start off with these unusual little tidbits and details, and you'd be thinking, well, this is kind of meaningless. And then at the end, he'd just drop it on you, that this is about this famous person, and none of us knew all those little details about the person. Similar here, they announced the person of the week. They said the person of the week is Norman Borlaug, winner of the Nobel Prize and Medal of Freedom. And kind of silence. Anybody ever heard of Norman Borlaug? Who is Norman Borlaug, and what significance could he possibly have, right? So Norman Borlaug was a agricultural geneticist, and what he did in the 1940s, he worked with hybrids. We know hybrids are important to agriculture, right? Where our scientists can take the strengths of certain crops, and as they breed them, we get stronger crops. What Borlaug did was he worked with hybridized, high-yield, disease-resistant corn and wheat. This actually is very, very amazing, because as he developed this, what they found is these seeds flourished. They flourished in the United States, in the Southwest, where it's very dry. They flourished in Africa, where there's hardly any water. Asia, Europe, all around the world, these strains of hybridized corn and wheat developed and grew, and they grew massive amounts of food. Throughout the years, it has now been calculated that Norman Borlaug's work has saved over 2 billion lives, and still counting. So this one man, from this work he did, I don't know how big the facility was, but in an office somewhere, right, that nobody's ever heard of, has saved over 2 billion lives. When you hear that, wow, I should know who Norman Borlaug is, but nobody does. So really, we should thank Norman Borlaug and say, amazing, fantastic. He's been a blessing to all mankind because he saved 2 billion lives. But maybe, actually, if we can get this to work. Okay. Charlotte is saving me here. There we go. Let's try it. There we go. Thanks, Charlotte. Actually, maybe it wasn't Norman Borlaug that saved 2 billion lives. Maybe it was Henry Wallace. Have you ever heard of Henry Wallace? Okay, Fred. Henry Wallace was actually vice president of the United States under FDR. And some people may say, oh, Truman was, but Truman served multiple terms, right? And in his middle term, Henry Wallace was the vice president. Henry Wallace actually, before vice president, was Secretary of Agriculture. And as Secretary of Agriculture, he started and was able to help Congress generate the funds and started a research facility in the Southwest. And guess what they researched? Hybrids. And guess who he hired to work? Norman Borlaug, a very young college graduate who had an interest in hybridizing grain. And he found him and he said, I'm going to create the opportunity, and provided this facility for Norman Borlaug to go do his work. Without that, without Henry Wallace, Norman Borlaug would have never had the opportunity, right? So really, If you think about it, we have another dot here, right? On these think of a dot to dot. They're being connected here. Henry Wallace is the one we should be thanking for being a blessing and saving 2 billion lives. Or maybe it was George Washington Carver. Anybody ever heard of George Washington Carver? Everybody's heard of George Washington Carver, the developer of the peanut and an amazing scientist himself. George Washington Carver has developed over 266 uses for peanuts. My favorite is peanut butter, right? Peanut butter cookies, which I had yesterday, thanks to my wonderful wife. Over 88 uses for sweet potatoes. That's just to scratch the surface. But what most people don't know is when George Washington Carver was in college, he went to college at Iowa State. And when he was in college, he was a young college student studying agriculture. And on the weekends, there was an opportunity for him to volunteer at the local garden area. And what would happen is young children would come who needed something to do, and they would come, and George Washington Carver would volunteer his time teaching these kids and helping them learn about plants and learn about how plants can benefit society. And of course, teaching about peanuts and sweet potatoes and who knows what else. And as a 6-year-old child, guess who went to his classes? Henry Wallace. So really, we think about it, George Washington Carver, who inspired Henry Wallace and created a love for agriculture and plants and the ways plants can benefit mankind, really is the one that started this whole thing, because he inspired Henry Wallace, who then took it upon himself to build, and then, or maybe it was a farmer from Missouri named Moses. And Moses was a farmer in central Missouri back in the mid-1800s. And it was a crazy time in the mid-1800s. And in that part of Missouri, there were a lot of people doing bad things. Quantrill's Raiders, you ever heard of that name? They were some people doing some things, and there was a lot of bad stuff going on. And one night on Moses and Susan, his wife was named Susan, on their farm, Quantrill's Raiders came through. They burned his barn, they destroyed his crops, and they kidnapped a young woman and her baby that were living on the farm and rode off into the night. And the next day, Moses and Susan were desperate. Susan especially, because she had a special connection with this woman who was named Mary. And she begged and pleaded for her husband, something has to be done. This isn't right. They can't just do this. And her husband didn't know for sure. He had to make a decision. Should he take action? Should he not take action? Was there anything he could do? So they contacted other people, and through all these connections and all this work, they were able to set up a meeting with the Quantrill's Raiders. And Moses rode off one day on his horse, 2-3 hours north into the state of Kansas, kind of up a little bit, and met with Quantrill's Raiders. And the actual meeting time, the way that was set up, was in the middle of the night. So in the middle of the night, out by himself, alone, he met with this group of raiders and traded the horse he rode, which was his last animal on his farm. He traded it for what he thought he was going to trade for Mary and her child. But Mary was not there. Quantrill's Raiders took the horse and threw a burlap bag on the ground and rode off. And Moses opened up the burlap bag, and inside the burlap bag was a small child, barely alive. And he took the child up, put it inside his coat, wrapped it, and walked from Kansas all the way back to Missouri. They saved the child's life. And they decided to raise the child in honor of Susan's friend Mary, and raise it, and they committed to helping the child get an education, and they gave the child their name. Moses' name was Moses Carver. Mary's name was Mary Washington. And the child's name was George. And the child was named George Washington Carver, because Moses Carver and Susan Carver raised the child. So really, if you think about it, quite an amazing story, isn't it? If you think about it, it was Moses Carver, through no thought other than to take this one action, set in motion a chain of events which has saved more than 2 billion lives and counting. Now, how long has Moses been gone? 100 years, 150 years. Did he ever see what happened? Did he even know exactly what outcome that his actions would have or what impact? There's no way he would know. But that's what happened. So really, it's Moses Carver that has saved 2 billion lives. Or some people may say it was Susan, right, who influenced her husband to take action. And how long could we go on? You see the point. It's an amazing story. But that's the point. The connectivity here is unbelievable. What one small event or action or decision that was made can have an impact. So the question I have is, how far forward would we need to go in your life to show the difference you will make? How far forward? 1 generation? 2? Maybe it's current. Every once in a while we get to see something, right, where we have a part in it, or we get to have an impact and we can see the fruits of that. But many times we're never going to see. It could be generations before some result. And all along the way maybe results, right? Every single thing we do matters. And that's the most important thing that I hope to share today. And it has meaning to me as I think about this. It's really, really amazing to think about how one butterfly, if we're each a butterfly, if you will, as we flap our wings, we have a chance to set in motion a chain of events that could influence all of mankind, and will, right? So our screen is back up, so I'm going to go click the button so we can advance our show here. Each of us should really be able to meditate on this and be thankful for this. We've each been created as one of a kind. We all know that there's no set of fingerprints that are duplicate, right? I love the one about snowflakes. There's no one snowflake that is the same. That's kind of neat to think about. But none of us have the same fingerprints. And isn't it eye pattern? Is it the way our eye, retina? No same retina. But each one of us is unique and different. And God has created us this way. There's not one like us before, and there will never be one like us again. And again, that was God's intention. All of our skills and attributes and our experiences in life and the relationships we have, that's who makes us what we are and gives us such a unique opportunity to be able to have impact on other people's lives. And it's really pretty powerful to think about when we really think about it. And in all the busyness that we face day in and day out, right, it's easy to forget that, I think, sometimes. So we have been created to make a difference. And that's what I think we have the opportunity to ask ourselves each and every day is, how can I make a difference? What can I do? What action can I take to be able to make a difference? So as I evaluate what's going on in my life from day to day, and I would ask us all as brothers and sisters here to do the same, our energy can't be hoarded or saved for later. You know, who knows what's going to happen later, right? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after or next year. But each and every day, take opportunity to make choices and actions that can help others. Because what we do from some of these stories matter forever. And who knows? Maybe at some point in the future, somebody will be telling that story and we'll be in that chain. We are. Each one of us is in a chain somewhere along the line, right? Each one of us is a dot that's connecting other dots together. Matthew 25, verse 34 through 40 says, Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." And this is a scripture we all know, isn't it? "For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you took me in. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. And I was in prison, and you came to me." And then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, stranger, naked, sick, or in prison?" And the king will answer and say to them, "Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of my brethren, you did it to me." That's really powerful. And it is good for us to be reminded of that, because sometimes, for myself at least, it's easy to rank and prioritize things, or to talk myself into believing that this little thing that maybe I could choose to do or not to do isn't really going to make that much of a difference. It'd be easier just to not do it. It might make me feel uncomfortable. I don't know what they'll think about me. Anybody ever been there before? I've been there. But it's more about taking action, making a decision to do something. And we all know the Spirit speaks to us. We've all felt that, right? That little inspiration that comes into our mind. I should do something. That's the Spirit talking to us. It is, right? It's the Spirit saying, do that. You need to do that, especially when we're thinking of it. It's something good, and we know it's good. So I find myself at times trying to talk myself out of it. Why? I don't know why, because it's going to take energy and be hard, and there's something that would be easier. But no, think of all those people in that neat story that is all connected together through hundreds of years, right? So that's where we allow the Spirit to move us and to cause us to take action. Not put it off till tomorrow, not say I'll do it next year, but do it now, because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. God knows all, and He's in charge. His love is flowing through us, and it has a multiplying effect. Like we said earlier, it's kind of like a spiritual butterfly effect. Small things we do have a large effect on other people's lives, even if we don't see them. Many times we're not going to ever see them. We won't know how that's going to multiply through time. But the fact that we took that opportunity has nurtured that, and then it will blossom and develop and multiply. A small word of hope or encouragement can have a big impact on somebody's life, and making a choice to take action can multiply and expand. It's pretty amazing. So this is what I try to help myself, and again, I'm far from perfect, but we all have an opportunity every day to make a choice, each and every day, to take action and make a difference. And this connectivity, kind of like those dot to dots that we saw earlier. Guess who knows what all the numbers are? God. He made it all. There's a map. He has a plan in place. He knows who we are. We're here for a reason. He doesn't force us to do anything, but the Spirit speaks to us and gives us opportunity. And it was kind of interesting as I was thinking about this topic and just thinking about other things, and all of a sudden this kind of weird but similar parallel thought came into my mind. You know the story of Johnny Appleseed? It just kind of popped into my head. Johnny Appleseed, and this, I guess from what I know, Johnny Appleseed was a real person. And he decided as he traveled the country, he was going to carry a bag of apple seeds and just throw out seeds as he went, right? And people probably thought he was crazy if you think about it. Hey, Johnny, what you got in that bag? A bunch of apple seeds? What? But there's a story and an analogy there that I think could help us see that we all could be Johnny Appleseeds. There's opportunity for us to love others and impact their lives. Whatever we do or say or how we treat people. It's interesting at work. I try to do my best, as I know we all do when we interact with people, have a smile on our face and just be positive. Because there's so many things in life that are going to be challenging and be hard. And there's bad things that happen around us. We know that all the time. God sees all, He knows all, and the great thing is, because we know the truth, we can have courage. Because we know God's plan is, He's in charge, and all things will be okay in the end. He's going to make sure of that. And so one of the most popular things to say at work is when you ask somebody how they're doing, well, I'm hanging in there. Well, I'm getting by. Think about that. How terrible is that? How weak is that? All you're doing is you're just hanging on at the very end of your rope. So, how you doing? I'm doing great. Things are going to be good. Let's have a good week. Let's make a difference. Let's do something good this week. The clerk at the store, right? Is there a store at the clerk? I don't think so. The clerk at the store could be somebody you run into in line. We all see these people. It doesn't matter who they are. They strike up a conversation with somebody, and they got the person smiling within 10 seconds. Could be at the grocery store or the gas station. I don't know where it's going to be. It could be taking action on a service project, right? It'd be easier not to go on a service project, but I can make a difference in somebody's life. Let's go do it. It could be helping somebody in the community, somebody that's suffering. We don't have to change the world overnight, but by flapping our butterfly wings, we could have an impact for all time. And that's what really matters here. That's what we're talking about. I'm going to try to flap my butterfly wings, so this won't keep it. In the future, we'll figure out how to get this computer working right without having to tap it so many times. So back to the dot to dot. Anybody get it, putting it together a little bit yet? How about if I give you something to kind of trace? I had a whole bunch of butterflies. We can all be a butterfly. We don't have to worry about connecting the dots. God's going to do that for us. He knows the numbers. He'll do it. And how neat will it be in the future? Because we're never going to see it in our physical lives. We'll never see the seeds grow into apple trees. We may not see the multiplying effect that our actions and the choices and the things we do and say can have. But maybe someday in the future, when we're with God, and He's going to show us this map. This giant dot to dot, right? And all those dots are people or something that's happened in somebody's lives. And there's all this connectivity. Won't that be really cool? I look forward to that, and I hope that happens for all of us someday. So I would leave us with that. Let's be butterflies and encourage each other and be there for each other, and especially all those people around us. All right, very good. We are now going to have communion, right? All right, I'm going to switch it back over.